My name is Theodora Scorado, and I'm Executive Director with Environmental Health Trust. In this webinar, I am going to briefly, and I will not be able to capture everything about the issue of 5G, but talk a little bit about some key points and resources that you can use moving forward, as well as what we're doing in order to build capacity to educate people both in the United States and around the world on this issue, and to share the science that is already published and the scientific call to action on 5G. So what is 5G? 5G is the fifth generation technology, which promises to tie together, industry says, the Internet of Things and its super fast speeds. So that is what we are told. What comes along with 5G are millions of new wireless antennas and devices that are going to be in our streets, in our homes, in businesses. And just in the United States alone, the FCC talked about 800,000 wireless facilities needed. So we're talking about millions worldwide.
Maybe you've heard about exciting new 5G technology that promises to make our connections to the internet and all of the things connected to the internet faster and better than ever. Like other cell phone technology, 5G emits radiation. Two federal agencies recently said the available scientific evidence does not support the idea that 5G emits enough radiation to hurt people. But some scientists disagree. At first, the concerns sounded far-fetched. We were surprised by what we learned. Is it your feeling that mobile phone use and 5G in the future have been and are causes of chronic disease epidemics in this country?
I believe that the exposures we already have are producing major effects already on our health, and that 5G will be vastly worse than anything that we are already exposed to.
At least 3 expert medical groups have linked certain kinds of electromagnetic fields, or EMFs, to cancer, particularly childhood leukemia. The U.S. National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, a working group under the World Health Organization, and a European scientific committee, which studied cell phones in particular. Paul says there's more to worry about.
What's been shown is you get depression, I can't sleep, I'm tired all the time, I'm depressed, I've got headaches, I can't concentrate, I'm anxious. All the things that everybody complains about now, we know are caused by EMF exposures. And not just one type, but multiple types of EMF exposures.
Stop 5G! We want safe technology!
The concerns are shared by citizens and scientists around the world.
These antennas are being installed without our permission, without any warning at all. Many of us do not want to be guinea pigs in this experiment, but we apparently have no say in the matter.
Now, when we talk about 5G, you'll often hear if we need 5G and we need to be putting up all of these new quote unquote small cells, which are actually short cell towers that have antennas on them that will have the communication, allow communication between the devices. But what we're often not told is that actually all of us talk about 5G, what they're actually putting in a lot of places is 4G, is densifying 4G, which is the backbone for 5G. In some cities, there are test cities for 5G where 5G networks are actually being tested. But in a lot, they're putting in small cells with 4G and actually 3G, and then they can later put on 5G antennas. And these antennas will be mounted on utility poles, streetlights, buildings. There'll be new antennas. The picture that you're seeing was sent to us. This is someone's window, and you can see the antenna, the pole goes up, and there's the antennas right there. And the part of the picture that's not being discussed, there's actually a lot. There's privacy, energy use, I'm going to talk about that too, impacts to trees, just from the infrastructure and to wildlife, but also the radiation emissions from the antennas, because this is going to increase the radiation levels in, especially near the antenna, but in our neighborhoods where we live, work, and play. And that is factual. It's been shown in multiple studies as well. There's a recent study on 4G LTE that talked about how the levels will be increased near all of the vicinity of the small cells. Even if your cell phone might emit less power to reach these small cells, the overall involuntary exposure will be increased. And here are just some more pictures to see what we're talking about. So the middle picture actually is one that I took when I was in San Francisco and in a hotel, and I looked out my window, and this is literally directly from my window. The levels were quite elevated in my room, and you can see how close that is to the window of the folks whose room was just a few feet away from mine. Then on the right is showing the electrical equipment that often accompanies small cells. And you can see all of these boxes, which is really an eyesore, which is also a whole other issue because these are being placed in near neighborhoods in front of homes. And just to show you the densification of what we're talking about, this is just a map of proposed sites for antennas in a community near mine in North Potomac, Maryland. You can see all the little triangles. And when this was proposed, literally hundreds of packed rooms, hearing rooms, in opposition to these being placed in neighborhoods in front of homes. There is a groundswell of opposition to 5G worldwide, and I wanted to share with you just some images and some of what's going on in the world. And this is by no means, I mean, there's so much, and if you want to keep up, please go to our Facebook page where we share recent news on all kinds of things related to 5G and cell phones, and also our newsletter, which you can go to our website, ehtrust.org, and you can, sign up for our newsletter, which comes out about once a month, and we try to have a lot of the latest news on it. So this is an image from Switzerland, one of the latest protests in Bern, and there have been massive protests happening there. So much so that the country is really looking at this issue. And as we understand it, there are several cantons that have issued resolutions to halt new antenna sites where 5G antennas will be placed. Here are some images from Italy. And there are over a dozen cities in Italy that have issued resolutions to halt 5G, and that's growing all the time. Looks like the light is just a little funny in here. More from Italy. This is from Switzerland. Just to review some of the things, be they resolutions or ordinances. So in the United States, there are several cities that are passing ordinances to retain local authority related to the antennas. So the federal government has regulations that are moving forward fast to streamline 5G, to make it easier to place them, stripping local authorities' authority to regulate what's on their land. So most recently, Los Altos in California has said the small cells cannot be in residential areas. They have a 500-foot setback from schools. In Petaluma, there's a setback of 500 feet with the small cells. There's resolutions like in Hallandale, Florida. Then different cities are doing different, having different permitting processes, trying to have to have measurements before and after. to have much more information before small cells are placed in public notice and public hearings. And we have all of that online on a webpage on EHT about US ordinances, which I actually need to update, which I'll do after this webinar with some of the more recent ordinances that have been passed. I talked about Italy and Switzerland. I know in the United Kingdom, actually, it's more than 2. I think we're at 5 council resolutions opposing 5G. There's been a lot of news about that. It's on our Facebook page. Belgium, what's happening in several countries, there are countries that allow much lower levels of radiation to be kind of the ambient levels in the air because they have more stricter regulations compared to the United States. And actually several other countries that use FCC limits or ICNIRP limits. And in those countries that have stricter limits, industry is saying they can't fully deploy 5G unless those limits become looser so they can allow more radiation, especially in the vicinity of where the antennas are. In those countries, there's been a lot of opposition because they don't want to change their more protective precautionary limits. Belgium is one of those, and that was temporarily halted several months ago as there was discussions about how much higher the levels would go. And we have that on our webpage on our site again about international actions on 5G. And that's an ongoing situation, so I need to get an update on what's happening there. As well, in Ireland, I just had a conversation with someone working in Ireland sharing that 5 city councils have resolutions to halt 5G. And again, this is not an exhaustive list, just some examples of what is going on. And I also wanted to point out that many countries inform their citizens and their residents about how to reduce exposure to cell phone radiation and recommend that it be reduced, especially for children and pregnant women. And as an example, this is the back of a bus in Cyprus, where they have a new public health awareness campaign educating on how to reduce wireless exposure to children. And you can see the bus there, and then the translation, don't irradiate me, learn how to protect me. And if you go to our website under policy action, under Cyprus, you can see their brochures that they're sharing with parents and communities on how to reduce exposure, like to cell phones, keeping it a distance. All of this we have on our website. In addition, in Cyprus, they have removed Wi-Fi from the intensive care units for pediatrics in the Archbishop Macarius Hospital. And we also have that up. So a lot is happening internationally, and the United States, I hope, can catch up on that because that's where I live. So in Switzerland, that is just so much is happening there. I talked about how there is just a large, really a country discussion happening. And as I understand it, they are looking at measuring the levels and informing the public about the findings. And there's a lot of news stories going on where different officials are talking about this issue. In addition to industry statements that there's no research, that there is no basis for this concern. However, as I'm going to talk about, there is a large group and groups of scientists who are not just concerned, they are opposed to the rollout of 5G because of the scientific evidence that currently exists on wireless communications, and because of the research that exists on millimeter waves, which is adding additional information into the mix about impacts to people, birds, trees, bees. So also there are a lot of countries that are saying, okay, we're going to look into 5G, we're going to have reports, and oftentimes these are done by not public health officials, but rather by the technology sector, So I have here examples of the Parliament of Australia, where scope is not in the scope of reference about the questions about 5G. They're going to be doing a report, as well as Austria. And that is, there's a study being commissioned on the health effects of 5G by a consortium, which are the technology groups. And so that is forthcoming. We believe that health, human health, as well as the impacts to the environment, need to be a part of any conversation about 5G. And here is just an image from the San Diego Union Tribune about a council meeting and kind of what's happening in the United States. So more than 150 people, many waving Stop 5G posters, attended a city-sponsored workshop Monday on a new city ordinance that would allow 5G antennas to be installed along cities' rights-of-ways. And I should add that if there's news that you hear about that is not on our site, please send us that information, because it is a massive undertaking to get this information and put it up. We cannot have everything on our site, but we really try to have a range. And if you have information, if your city council has issued a resolution, please send us the resolution and any information that you want to have up in the form that it should be up on our page, and we will get it up. But we do need the links that are direct to the source. Okay, oops, I'm gonna back up to that. So in the United States, there's actually several states that have passed laws calling for research on 5G. Louisiana, as well as New Hampshire and Oregon. Actually, Oregon is just on wireless, so I'll talk about New Hampshire and Louisiana. The New Hampshire House Bill 522 is an act establishing a commission to study the environmental and health effects of 5G. And the commission has come together. I believe they may have met already. I don't know their timeline. It's probably up on the state site. But they have questions to investigate. And I would urge everyone to take a look at this bill, HB 522, and read the questions that this commission is going to ponder. One of them being, why have thousands of peer-reviewed studies, including the recently published U.S. Toxicology Program 16-year, $30 million study showing a wide range of statistically significant effects such as DNA damage, brain and heart tumors, infertility, why is it being ignored by the FCC? That's the U.S. regulatory agency for telecommunications. That's one question they have. I have that question too. As well as why are limits set much lower in other countries? Why are so many scientists appealing to the World Health Organization to protect public health? And these are really important questions. In the United States, we have completely dropped the ball on this issue. And as Senator Blumenthal said, we're flying blind on health and safety because we do not have not a single health and safety agency whose job it is to have authority over understanding and protecting the environment and public from the radiation from cell antennas. The FDA is only tasked to take action if there's a problem with phones or devices, but no one is looking at the involuntary exposures in the United States, and this is extremely important. And I believe there needs to be a congressional hearing into the matter to understand how we could have no accountability in that regard. So now I'm going to talk about the scientific call to action and a little bit about the science, which is a huge issue. We have a page on our site. Under the 5G tab, you can find research on 5G and health, and we link to several studies. So you can just see, like, this study published in this journal says the following. We have short paragraphs for several studies, which is a good starting point. So in 2015, there was an appeal which was launched. It's now been signed by more than 240 scientists at this point. But it was an appeal to the United Nations calling for action on wireless radiation and electromagnetic radiation, also the lower frequency fields, like from power lines. And just a quick quote, the numerous recent scientific publications have shown that electromagnetic fields affects living organisms at levels well below most international and national guidelines. These effects include increased cancer risk, cellular damage, increases in harmful free radicals, genetic damages, structural and functional changes of the reproductive system, learning and memory deficits, neurological disorders, and negative impacts on general well-being. You can download the full text of the appeal at the EMF scientist website, but also at the European Journal of Oncology, where that's been published, and there's a PDF that you can download and share that with your community and your elected officials. And I should add, there have been many appeals over decades by scientists on this issue. So these are only a small handful of the most recent that I'm going to talk about now. The 5G appeal was launched in Europe, and that was signed by scientists and doctors. I believe it's signed by over 240 scientists now, calling for a moratorium on the rollout of 5G because of the increases in radiation exposure and because of the scientific evidence that already exists. So that is at 5gappeal.edu. Dr. Leonard Hardell has been instrumental in that appeal, and I would urge you to take a look at the research that he's published as well. He did studies on Agent Orange in the 80s. He's one of the leading experts on cell phone radiation. And his research, the conclusion of his studies and of his analysis and his team's analysis is that radio frequency radiation is a human carcinogen, and that our guidelines that we rely on to keep us safe, this is the question we all have, right? How much is safe? That they need to be revised to protect the public. He also authored an analysis in the International Journal of Oncology, World Health Organization, Radio Frequency Radiation and Health, A Hard Nut to Crack, looking at the conflicts of interest that we have in our international authorities. Because if you raise this issue in your community, most likely you'll get an email back, many people do, saying, well, I went to the World Health Organization site, and they say that there's not a problem, that there's no evidence. And those are fact sheets that are up on the EMF project site of the WHO. But that is a separate entity from the International Agency for the Research on Cancer, which is also under the WHO, which is independent. It was, and they last met in 2011, and now are going to be revisiting this issue, having a reconvening. It's been recommended that they reconvene to look at the research on radio frequency as a carcinogen. As well, there's ICNIRP, the International Commission on Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection, and he talks about the conflicts of interest there and the how industry loyal groups are really the authorities that many countries rely on. And this is a problem because they are closed clubs. The International Society of Doctors for the Environment, which has many member organizations, has an appeal for a standstill in respect because of the precautionary principle, stating that it would be unethical to ignore the available evidence, and that's, I'll tell you, as a mother, we practice the precautionary principle all the time. And why would we roll something out with so many scientists calling to halt something, it is, to me, unethical as well. However, many scientists say this is not about being precautionary anymore, I should add. They say there's enough science to know that there is a problem. Yes, more research can be done, but at this point, we shouldn't be exposing people to something in light of the science that already exists. So some new appeals that just came out, the Belgium electrosmog appeal, that's been signed by over 344 doctors and health professionals from Belgium. And on the eve of the deployment of 5G, Belgian health officials sound the alarm. They are asking for reduction measures and protections for children. Also, the Cyprus Medical Association and the Cyprus Committee on Environment and Children's Health just submitted a statement calling for protections for people and the implementation of 5G protection zones and the prohibition of the use of wireless internet and wireless devices, tablets and mobiles in kindergartens and schools as well. I'm just going to take a minute while I have that on the screen to read some of the comments, because there are a lot of comments here, just so I can integrate any of that in. Okay. There is a review about wireless by Dr. Cindy Russell, Executive Director of Physicians for Safe Technology. That's MD Safe Tech is the website. And that's a very useful document to share when people ask, well, where's the science? So I would recommend that. And she concludes that that 5G, 5G is a new form of environmental pollution, and precaution is strongly indicated. And she looks at a lot of the different studies on millimeter waves as well, because 5G is going to be using, I should have had a slide on that, I apologize. 5G is going to be using the current frequencies that we have now, and also higher frequencies never used before at this scale in the public. It's widespread in the public. And those millimeter and submillimeter waves will impact health of the environment differently. So she talks about research looking at bacteria and skin effects as well. And we have that also, a list of studies on our webpage on Research on 5G, where you can link to that. Now, one of the questions that I had when I first learned about the issue of wireless about a decade ago, when I first got interested in this issue, way before I knew anything, was that, who are why, if there's all this research and there's all these scientists calling for harm, why has there been why are our limits what they are, and why has this continued to be deployed, all of these new technologies, and there's been no addressing of all of this research that has found adverse effects? And there's a couple investigations that are quite eye-opening. One is the Harvard report, Captured Agency, how the Federal Communications Commission is dominated by the industries it presumably regulates. And it looks into the FCC, into Congress and industry money, and makes comparisons between the big tech and telecommunications and big tobacco, the tactics used to create doubt, as well as industry money in the science. And that's really one of our hugest challenges, is that there's so much money. There's so much money in the telecommunications industry and so much money in the science and funding of scientists, that when someone just wants to know, well, what does the data say? That you really have to understand, well, who funded the study? But then you have to go even deeper than that, actually, because there are a lot of university departments which actually are funded by industry. Whereas if you look at who funded it, you'll see the University of so-and-so, except that they are in fact highly funded by industry, who might refer to that university department as their R&D arm, their research arm. They give so much money into it. And that's what industry is doing. So that is the challenge. However, I think it's quite clear, and there's research that has been published on this. We have a web page where we list all the studies that have to do with industry influence and investigations into industry influence. And there's research that's looked at cell phones and brain tumors and found that sponsorship plays a role in what the effects might be. So I would recommend that page as well. And Dr. Henry Lai, this is from a few years ago, but it seems to be remaining the same, that when you break down who funds the study, you find what we usually find, which is that when studies are funded independently, the majority find an effect. When they're funded by industry, the majority find no effect. And there continues to be tallying of this, and that's all on our webpage on ehtrust.org. In thinking about this issue, it's important, I think, to think about how we think about tobacco smoke, firsthand, secondhand, and thirdhand. So firsthand would be a cell phone to the head or to the body. Just like a person smoking a cigarette, you're going to have intense exposures. You're breathing in the smoke. And when you have a cell phone to your body, you're getting very intense localized exposure right to the tissue on the other side of the antenna of the phone or the laptop or the device. With secondhand, then you have secondhand smoke where you might have a child near someone using a device, similar to if someone is smoking and a child is nearby. There's going to be exposure to the people near a user. Third-hand smoke, I think, can be likened to the emissions from antennas because of how it will increase and how an antenna creates exposures near the vicinity of the antenna. And likewise, there's third-hand smoke, which is particles that can be on walls. You can think of lead contamination also as well from when cars had lead in the fuel, and that all industry said, hey, it's going to be so low not to worry about the lead in the exhaust, except now we know that it is one of the largest contributors to contamination, especially in roadsides where children play. So important question, and there's been certainly enough research, according to many scientists, has been what's going to be the impact to bees, trees, and birds who are going to be near these antennas. So if we're going to have, like in the town right north of me, 30 new antenna sites, well, bees are going to be perching on those antennas. There's nothing that's going to stop them from doing that. As well, there's a lot of trees in the community. What will be of the tree canopy, both at the top as well as the root system, because there'll be digging and new poles that have to be put in. There is research that has shown biochemical and physiological changes to bees after exposure to cell phone radio frequency, decline in colony strength and egg laying rate of the queen, adverse impacts to trees after repeated exposures have been found. I have a slide I'm going to show on that, and we have a whole web page where we try to have a compendium of research on impacts to trees. Electromagnetic fields impact bird navigation and reproduction because birds and insects, and actually it seems like all living beings have the ability to sense magnetic fields to a degree, and also many animals use it to navigate. And there's the Department of the Interior. Actually, we have a letter from the US Department of the Interior which says FCC limits are irrelevant because they're only based on heating, which is what ICNIRP limits are based on as well. And there are these research that has found impacts to birds, and we need to look at that. So I'll be talking a little bit more about that. This is a study, a really important study that was just published last year. So here, this is about the frequencies, the higher frequencies to be used in 5G, and how I think they tested 5 insects, how these waves are absorbed into their bodies. That was what the study was on. They used very sophisticated computer imaging. If you look at this image, and I'm showing you images from the western honeybee, and of course there are many insects that weren't studied. You can see colors, yellow, orange, red, purple. All of these colors are sort of like a heat map where they took an insect and then they simulated how different frequencies, especially the higher frequencies to be used in 5G, how would they be absorbed into the body of the insect that they were studying. And here you're seeing an example of the honeybee. And if you look, as the frequencies get higher, the absorption changes. The yellow is the highest level. Actually, it's white, yellow, and then it goes to orange, red, and purple. You can see there is a change. There is more. What the researchers found is that there was a much higher absorption into the bees and into insects, depending on their shape, actually, as the frequency matched the size of the insect, and quite substantial increases in absorption. And the authors state 2 important things I want to just pull out of this paper. One is that they say this is the first paper that investigates the exposure of electric fields with radio frequency associated with 5G wireless. So how could this be the first paper? Was like my first thought was the first paper. We're rolling this out and you don't even know, and this is the first paper? That seems for sure the cart before the horse, because we absolutely should know how technology is going to affect our environment, especially bees, which people rely on for food and nature relies on. And then the second key aspect is when they found these increases in absorption is that they say this could lead to changes in insect behavior, physiology, and morphology over time due to an increase, someone just wrote something, due to an increase in body temperatures from dielectric heating. Someone just said, are we automatically muted? I believe so. Unless, are people hearing more than me? Okay, I don't know. I just saw someone ask if we were automatically muted. So this is a really important paper. Again, it is on our site. You can look it up. And it is just an example of how this technology is rolling out without adequate testing about the impact to the environment. There's also substantial research on plants and trees going back for years. And there was a conference which you can watch excerpts from in 2011 about impacts to trees, actually, in the Netherlands. And I'll just quote a physicist who spoke, today I have absolutely no remaining doubt that weak technical electromagnetic fields are able to cause harm to living organisms. The PowerPoints at this symposium are online and available, and they are on our website. And this is just a screen save of the presentation. There is translations, and you can also see all the PowerPoints, which I talked about, which are online. And in this presentation, he talks about how trees are like a sink for radio frequency. Each of these things I'm talking about are really a world It's an entire deep dive we could do on each of these subjects. This is another study, one of many, but I think a very important one. This was a field study done over 9 years, looking at dozens of trees, where they looked over time, where there are base stations and trees, and they took measurements on different sides of the trees and found that there was harm, a statistically significant impact to many of the trees. And it says, a statistical analysis demonstrated that electromagnetic radiation from mobile phone masts is harmful to trees. These results are consistent with the fact that damage inflicted on trees by mobile phone towers usually start on one side, extending to the whole tree over time. There's also an observation guide and where you can see trees they took pictures of trees over the years, and in many cases, trees ultimately had to be felled because first they were injured on one side, as you can see from this image, and then the whole tree became sick and the tree had to be taken down. So bees, I wanted to share just some excerpts. You know, I don't have a clock, so I don't even know what time it is. So this is just going to go on as long as it goes. But these are some excerpts from a study on bees about a decade ago now in 2010. This is a CNN report that aired. And then I have a clip from a more recent video about how bees do sense electrical fields from plants and how they use electrical fields to pollinate. There are many, many studies that have been published since this study, but I just wanted to share this. Hope it works.
Something is killing the bees, that much is certain. Britain has seen a 17% decline in the bee population over the last year. In the United States, it's around 30%. It's been dubbed colony collapse disorder. Experts say possible culprits are a pest called varroa, pesticides, climate change, and loss of habitat. Now, some say, add to that the possible radiation from mobile phones. New research from scientists at Punjab University in India claims microwave radiation from mobile phones could be part of the problem. Researchers fitted mobile phones to a hive and powered them up for 2 15-minute periods each day. After 3 months, they found the bees stopped producing honey, egg production by the queen bee halved, and the size of the hive dramatically reduced. I spoke to an independent scientist in the UK about how the bees might have been affected. He pointed out that bees have a pigment called cryptochrome.
Animals, including insects, use cryptochrome for navigation. They use it to sense the direction of the Earth's magnetic field. And its ability to do this is compromised by the radiation from mobile phones and their base stations. So basically, bees do not find their way back to the hive.
Dr. Goldsworthy has written to the UK communications regulator Ofcom suggesting they change the phone frequencies so bees won't be confused.
It is possible to modify this signal coming from the mobile phone and the base station in such a way that it doesn't produce the frequencies that disturb the cryptochrome molecule. So they could do this without the signal losing its ability to transmit information.
Ofcom's passed the details on to the mobile phone companies. We spoke to the Mobile Phone Operators Association. They responded. Research scientists have already considered possible factors involved in colony collapse disorder and have identified the areas for research into the causes of CCD, which does not include exposure to radio waves. And expert bee scientists are sceptical.
We know they're sensitive to magnetic fields. What we don't know is what use they actually make of that. And nobody has as yet actually demonstrated that honeybees make use of the Earth's magnetic field when navigating.
So you can imagine, you know, I mean, we certainly can all imagine, and what we need is far more research to fully understand how birds and bees are affected. However, it shouldn't be roll it out and then do research, because we already have, and we have a lot of this listed on our website, studies that show how bees are sensitive to radio frequency fields. And so there's a lot of published research on this. And in addition, birds which also navigate using electromagnetic, you know, understanding the magnetic fields. I mean, they're navigating. They also have there's research showing impacts to reproduction from radio frequency. And in India, there was an interministerial report, actually I don't have a slide on this, but that looked at impacts to birds and bees. And that was part of the reason why the country made stricter their norms for radio frequency radiation, actually quite substantially, several years ago. So I thought it would be interesting to share this. In India, there was a large scale, a huge installation done over several months with many workers to raise awareness about the impacts of 5G to birds. And I'm going to share with you a short video where I compiled some from Facebook and also from a news about this piece that they did for the public, raising the issue of the impacts of actually 3G, 4G, and 5G cell towers and birds, and harm to birds. Oops. And they actually, that installation won an award at the festival for the work that they did. And it's quite incredible. You can go online and learn more about that. But I think that there's a lot of science. There's no lack of scientific evidence. And now we're at the, let's bring in the art, because art is how to raise awareness in communities. And I was so impressed by this. It was the Barisha Club that did this. They have festivals, and every year different groups will create installations for the festival on different topics. And this just happened. So here we are. I also would invite you to check out Prakash Munshi's information, as well as Juhi Chawla, who have Citizens of Tomorrow and other groups in India that are working on cell phone radiation, cell tower radiation awareness, and 5G. Whoops. Okay, so, you know, again, I'm touching on a lot of subjects here, and something that I just was shocked about, because 5G is being tested in several cities around the world. It's also being tested on cows. And I wanted to just share an excerpt from a BBC piece about 5G in cows and how it's being utilized.
In this idyllic patch of British countryside, the birds are cheerfully singing and the cows are peacefully grazing. But look closer and you will see there is something very different about these cows, linking them to a unique experiment.
This dairy farm in Somerset is one of the first test beds for 5G in the UK.
The cows are wearing sensors, and all of the data is being sent to the cloud and then back to the farmer, who can make decisions based on this data. Almost every task on this farm can be automated. These cows are queuing up patiently to be robotically milked. This system allows the cow to choose how many times a day and at what time it wants to be milked. The robot picks up on how much milk is coming from each of the cow's udders and can control the sensitivity of the milking as well. The cows here come and go as they please, with little human interaction in their movements. The farm was chosen to demonstrate how 5G would help bring together the many different points of data across a herd of cows. Low latency and the ability to cover large distances with 5G means the cows can be monitored in real time, even if they're grazing in the field. What sensors is she wearing? Can we see any of them that are on her?
So on the collar, there's a little black square.
Right.
It says Affimilk Silent Herdsman on it. So that's one of the sensors, and it's an activity monitor.
Like a wearable that you'd wear, like a watch.
But the sort of thing it does is tells you when the cow's eating, because it's got a feed tonometer, so when her head's down, it says okay.
Yeah.
She's got the green one transponder underneath her chin.
Yeah.
They have a collar with a transponder underneath their chin, which is the one that controls the gates and so on that give them access to the robot. The robot then knows, right, I know this cow, I know where its teeth are.
Aside from custom milk jobs, researchers can keep tabs on the whereabouts and well-being of cattle by monitoring physical activity. It's all made possible by the 5G networks most of us still don't have on our phones.
So I thought this was, I just have no words for this, because as I was watching this, one was just thinking about all the research that's been done on cows themselves and how they are sensitive to electromagnetic fields. At non-ionizing electromagnetic fields, there's actually been several, not only published research, but also litigation by farmers when cows are under power lines or with static fields about the impacts to milk production. And here they are experimenting with cows with 5G. And I also was thinking about how we are being experimented on, all of these wearables, and they're talking about the cows, but actually there are applications where sensors and antennas are used to know where people are, where kids are in school, et cetera. So one other thing I wanted to mention actually that I had forgotten was Andrew Goldsworthy, who was interviewed in the piece on bees, has several reports also, which are linked to on our compendium on our website, on the impacts to bees, which are very, very important to read in terms of his analysis. Oops. So, yeah. Now, 5G is being touted as, virtual reality. We're going to be kids, and we're all going to be able to have virtual reality and go places, special field trips in schools. Google Google Expeditions was the name of a project where in the United States, and I believe around the world, kids were given these cardboard boxes, and then you could put phones in them and go on a virtual field trip in classrooms. And to the right, you'll see imaging in a published study that looked at a smartphone in that position and the absorption into the head and into the eye, which found, of course, that children absorb they have a proportionately more exposure to the radio frequency into their eyes and brain in comparison to adults. But also that, the eyes are very sensitive and they are getting some of the highest exposures. So, and this is an image actually from a Google Expeditions in a school that was up on YouTube, and you can go online and watch all of these school children trying this out. The way I see it, schools are like a playpen for telecom to try out all of their tech, see how it works. What do people like? What don't they like? To get them interested, to work out some kinks. And it's experimentation onto our children, is how I see it. So I also wanted to share with you what companies are doing in schools. They are, just as they are testing 5G in cows, they are testing 5G in classrooms. Most recently in Montgomery County, Maryland, where I am, Verizon and tech companies are donating thousands of dollars to equipment into the schools, especially the schools that are have families who are lower income and more free lunch. And we're seeing this all over the country. And this becomes quite challenging because the companies are also asking that they put their infrastructure on our school grounds. And in many cases, they're successful in that. And several of our schools, both in Maryland and across the country and in other countries, are where cell antennas are placed. Of course, there are many countries that prohibit cell antennas from being placed on schools or near homes. Not in the United States, actually, except for in, I believe it's California and Los Angeles. They prohibit cell towers at schools. So I'm just going to show you a quick video, and this is excerpts from a video from Verizon about how they are testing 5G in schools.
5G is just an amazing technology, and we're so happy that we're able to bring this and share it with our students, and they get to be the first ones that really get to truly see this in a school. It's super exciting for us.
Technology gives kids so much hope into what their future can be. I had goosebumps thinking that the kids here could literally be in a virtual room with kids all around the world, learning from world-renowned physicists on how planets are formed.
So the first thing I wanted to just draw out is that technology and internet connections can happen wired. They don't have to be wireless. They don't have to be with apparatus that is in front of our eyes. They don't have to be with virtual reality. They can be wired connections. Kids can communicate with kids all over the world using safe, fast, and secure wired connections. So what's being done here is putting together, conflating together that the only way to do that is with wireless technology, and that's not the case. So I just wanted to point that out. But more importantly, that these kids and these schools are being used as places of experimentation with this new technology. And in light of all the research, this is not ethical. Okay. Another aspect, really important, and there's been a lot of research done on this, is the carbon footprint and the energy usage of 5G and of the Internet of Things. We have a web page. It's on our website, ehtrust.org, Energy Consumption of 5G Wireless Systems in the Digital Ecosystem. And we list several studies, what they've found, and how analysts are saying there is going to be a lot, we are increasing our use of energy because of the IOT and because of our use of digital devices. Wireless in particular is a large contributor. Cloud computing is a large contributor. And most recently, I wanted to point out the SHIFT report. We have this on our site. There's also a 2-page synopsis of the report that that they put out that you can download and use. We have links to all of this. And what they talk about is that the trend for digital overconsumption is not sustainable with respect to the supply of energy and the materials it requires. The reasons between the growth in energy consumption from digital technology is many reasons, but they've identified 4 main sources: the smartphone phenomenon, the multiplication of peripherals in daily life, and so peripherals are like all those additional things we use, like the wireless mouse, the wireless keyboard, the wireless hub in the room, security system, all of these things which are now digital. They require batteries. or they have to be charged. Before, we didn't have all of these peripherals. The rise in the industrial Internet of Things and the explosion of data traffic, and especially video. So as an example, kids are FaceTiming and video chatting. And, I have 2 teenagers. All they want to do is talk to each other and be close to each other. And when they're not together, they just want to be together all the time. And that is all video traffic. Then there's all kinds of videos, like funny cat videos. Porn is a huge, huge industry exploding in the video and internet scene. It always has, but now even more so with the internet. All of this is increasing demand for energy. And this study concludes that the energy consumption is increasing by 9% every year. It can be limited by moving to sober digital practices, meaning we really have to decrease our use of digital technology. And the digital transition, as it is currently implemented, participates to global warming more than it helps prevent it. The need for action is therefore urgent. So we often hear in meetings, in council meetings, industry says, our equipment is going to use so low power. This small cell is such low power compared to the cell tower. And that's absolutely true. However, if you're going to be putting hundreds of thousands of new small cells in, they all add up and together create additional energy usage in your community just from those small cells. Then you have all the things that are going to be communicating in this new, what's called the digital ecosystem, the Internet of Things. All of this needs to be considered. So this is not a sustainable technology as it is currently being implemented. And again, you can go on our website to learn more about that. Go to the Shift report, which I think really actually summarizes a lot of the research that has been done. So another critical area is liability insurance. When I give talks, the first question the lawyers ask is, has there been any litigation on this? Or what do insurance companies say? And that's where things get right to the point. Because insurance white papers classify electromagnetic fields as a pollutant. And certainly in the United States, telecom and big tech, they are not insured by insurance companies for damages from the long-term chronic exposure to electromagnetic fields. Insurance companies just won't insure them because they classify the risk as high. And here is an example of a recent report that came out this year in 2019 by Swiss Re, and they classify 5G as high impact. And they have a section in their report on new emerging risk insights about 5G as off the leash. And I'll just quote under potential impacts. They say that as the biological effects of EMF in general and 5G in particular are still being debated, potential claims for health impairments may come with a long latency. Long latency meaning it may take years before we see what the effects are until people start suing, although people already are. So I can talk a little bit about that. There already are many cases, both people who have developed brain tumors after heavy use of cell phones. In the United States, there are, I think it's now at over a dozen cases that have been consolidated and are winding their way through the court system. We have links to those on our site under court litigation. There are cases of children in schools. There are, in other countries, there have been cases that have been won. I know in Italy, I think 3 cases now related to brain tumors that developed in people who use cell phones long term. And they are requesting and getting disability and monies for compensation for those injuries, as well as cases where, like disability cases, where people are needing accommodations in their workplace in other countries and are first denied that, and then they are suing to get that, and then they have been successful in Australia, in France. We have that on our site as well. So, at least in the United States, wireless companies warn their shareholders, but not their customers or the residents who live near their antennas. They warn them that there could be potential future claims related to adverse effects. So I'll read Crown Castle. That's one of the companies that's installing infrastructure in communities in the United States. They say in their annual report, if frequency emissions from wireless handsets or equipment on our communications infrastructure are demonstrated to cause negative health effects, potential future claims could adversely affect our operations, costs, or revenues. And then, of course, they say, because they can't get insurance, we currently do not maintain any significant insurance with respect to these matters. Quote from Verizon, and we have a number of companies and links to these, to their annual reports or where they have these disclaimers. We may incur significant expenses in defending these lawsuits, referring to lawsuits related to cell phone brain tumors. In addition, we may be required to pay significant awards or settlements. So they're acknowledging that they may lose some of these court cases in time. And when you buy a phone or a device, and this is a quote from AT&T Mobile Insurance, they actually define pollutants and electromagnetic fields, sound waves, microwaves, electric fields, magnetic fields are in the definition of pollutants, and they will not pay for any loss caused directly or indirectly, any damage from a pollutant. So it's very interesting that the companies themselves won't insure when you buy their insurance. Insurance companies won't. As well, when you get insurance coverage, generally there is an exclusion for electromagnetic fields. And this is an example from the City of Ann Arbor Municipality Insurance. And we, again, have a list of this on our site with all of these. We link to the company coverage themselves, where they have exclusions. This is for an exclusion for electromagnetic radiation. It is defined. And not only does this insurance company exclude electromagnetic fields, harm from electromagnetic fields, but also if there's been supervision, instruction, recommendation, warning, or advice given or which should have been given in related to electromagnetic radiation. So they're also not insuring, it seems, the staff or the city as if they did or didn't inform people about this, and I find that quite interesting, and I think it's very important to find out in your city or town where you live is when officials are making decisions about this, are they insured? If they say, hey, we're putting this in and we didn't warn you, can you go back and sue them? And they might not be insured for that. And this is all important questions that need to be asked. We need to find out more about that in our communities. Okay, so I want to make sure that you have resources and action. This is just a few of what we have available. I am focusing on the United States and countries all over the world. There are 5G awareness, electromagnetic awareness, electromagnetic sensitivity awareness groups, which also have resources. And just recently, this was yesterday, Dr. Joel Moskowitz from UC Berkeley published a piece in Scientific American. We have no reason to believe 5G is safe. This is great to share. Please share this article. He has a website, saferemr.com, where he puts up news releases. He has compendiums as well on the science press releases, on cars, on every aspect of electromagnetic radiation. It's a great resource. I'm so thankful for his work. He's also given several talks that you can watch online. They're uploaded to YouTube as well. Here are just a few sites. First, because of the way this is, I can't read what's on my slide, but Physicians for Safe Technology is really important website with information and resources in the United States by physicians. That's mdsafetech.org. Dr. Cindy Russell, who published the review in environmental research I spoke to about earlier, is executive director. Dr. Moskowitz is an advisor. And she has, they have a blog and just so much on their site. So please check out their site. In the United States, Americans for Responsible Technology and 5G Crisis are doing a lot of awareness raising. And also they have toolkits on 5G and fact sheets, and just it's a great place to learn more. There is a coalition of which Environmental Health Trust is a part of, a coalition of Americans for Responsible Technology, working on protections in the United States in relation to this issue. What is 5G? Has information on the energy use, privacy, which I actually didn't touch on, I'm going to do in a later webinar, and impacts to humanity and how we relate, the science and health, and more. And then SafeG, SafeG.net, which is talking about, the solutions. The solutions are safe, a wired infrastructure to end user. So those are great resources. And here's just an example of what 5G Crisis is doing. You'll see on the left side door hangers that they have, so they're actually recommending upcoming, they have events that they put together just to help folks get organized. And these are door hangers. You can go door to door canvassing, raising awareness on the issue of 5G. They have, and I have examples on this image of signs that you can print out, fact sheets, points when talking to the press, and letters to the editor. Letter to the editor is a really great way to raise awareness in your community, is your local paper. Write something about this. Speak what you're thinking about, how it relates to your community, and get people talking about it. One of the things that we so importantly need is a transparent, full conversation on this issue. Not just, there's no evidence, I'm not listening to you, or I can't even talk about health, but rather we need a full public airing on this issue. And so we have to start to talk about it, have conversations. When people say there's no evidence, then there needs to be a place where there can be a conversation. Like, well, actually there is. Actually, there is studies on 4G, LTE in the brain. There is research on how 5G penetrates into the skin and is preferentially absorbed into our sweat ducts. A whole other subject that I didn't even get to in this short webinar, which I'm going to. So what we are doing now, this is from our Patreon page. We have decided we need financial support to maintain the work that we are doing. And we are now on Patreon. And what we have decided to do is to develop capacity building webinars like this for the world. And to do that, we're going to be having presentations, and patrons will be able to be on the webinar when it's live, and then asking questions so that you can be a part of the process, so that we can then answer those questions that people have. Then once we're done with the webinar, we're going to edit it and get it up on YouTube for everyone. So we always have free resources. But we wanted to invite all the the people around the world working on this issue to help us and collaborate with us on developing our webinars that we're putting out. I'm going to be doing a lot of like EMF basics, like what are EMFs, deep diving into this material. And then we're going to also be doing expert interviews with scientists on 5G, on wireless, on a number of issues, so that we can just continue to get this information out there in a huge way. We have a webinar with Dr. Anthony Miller coming up on October 29th, and I'm going to be doing a deeper dive into 5G. I'm also going to be doing a EMFs 101 kind of series, a webinar on how to reduce exposure in your home, how to reduce exposure to your cell phone, how to hardwire your internet. I should actually show you a couple other things that we have. These are all on our website. Our website is ehtrust.org. We have a new flyer. I actually need to update. So don't go right now because I need about an hour to upload these new files. We just created some new flyers and also large scale posters. So what you're seeing on the left is a poster which can be blown up to 24 by 36, and we have a PDF that is for a 24 by 36. So if you're at a table, at a fair, at a local fair in your community, you can have one of these made to invite people to start a conversation about 5G and small cells. And we have a number of other ones coming. We also have them in a small 8.5 by 11 size, so you can print it out. You want to put your content on the back so you can have information about your local group. It's just a way we're trying to continue with resources to raise awareness. We also have a newsletter, and if you go to our website, you can sign up for the newsletter on the right side, and we have monthly newsletters that go out just with latest news, what's going on, what we're doing, what our latest resources are. And that concludes a short bit of what I wanted to talk about today. There is a lot to talk about. There are reports out of the EU on 5G deployment that I want to go over. There is research looking into the impacts on skin. There is so much misinformation being put out by the media who, this is a complex subject. And it's easy to say, well, there's no research, or, oh, it's only going to penetrate a small amount into the skin, so it's not a big deal. And there are so many inaccuracies in what's being put out. So I want to have a myth fact webinar as well. And I hope you'll join us and also support Environmental Health Trust, because we are trying to put together the credible research, present you with scientists. I'm going to be having a webinar with clips of scientists who are speaking on different aspects of 5G and help to educate you and your community so that you can spread the word on this issue.
They're particular about the brand they choose. In a repeated national survey, doctors in all branches of medicine, doctors in all parts of the country were asked, "What cigarette do you smoke, doctor?" Once again, the brand named most was Camel.
5G can be a tremendous boom to California, but only if it can be put up quickly and easily.
Hayward Assemblymember Bill Quark co-authored legislation that would make it even harder for cities like Piedmont to object to a tower.
You wouldn't have to go through the Planning Commission, through the City Council.
The former NASA scientist says he may resurrect the bill recently vetoed by the governor.
I know scientifically that putting up these cell phone towers is safe.
But the International Association of Firefighters disagrees. They began opposing cell towers on fire stations after firefighters complained of health problems.
These firefighters developed symptoms.
Dr. Gunnar Heuser conducted a pilot study on firefighters at a station with cell towers.
And the symptoms included problem with memory, problem with intermittent confusion, problem with weakness.
Heuser says their brain scans suggest even low-level RF can cause cell damage, and he worries about more vulnerable groups like kids.
So we found abnormal brain function in all of the firefighters we examined.
So, following lobbying by firefighters, Cork and his co-author exempted fire stations from their bill, making them one place cell companies couldn't put a tower.
This is the first piece of legislation that I think anyone's aware of where somebody got an exemption because they were concerned about health. Did they tell you at all about the study?
All I know is that when the firefighters ask, you know, I do what they ask me to do.
Because they're strong lobbyists.
Yes.
So if, say, school teachers and parents had a strong lobby and they asked you to pass something that would prevent these from going up in your schools, would you do that?
If I couldn't get the votes any other way.
Firefighter and cancer survivor Tony Stefani notes,
it's not only firefighters, it's the people that live in the general vicinity of these towers.
Current regulations don't take into account continuous low-level exposure from these small cells 24 hours a day.
More of these studies have to be done.
There are 230 scientists from 41 countries who have apparently reviewed more than 2,000 peer-reviewed studies, and they're calling on the World Health Organization to do more studies. They're not convinced that this is safe.
I think doing more studies is always a good thing.
Do you think that maybe you should consider putting a pause on legislation that speeds up these towers until there's definitive evidence that there is no harm?
We can do a lot of studies, and there are people right now, believe it or not, who are sure the world is flat.
Smoke clean with New Bel Air. Air clean tobacco.